Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the National Landcare Conference 2021 and welcome to the Environment and Climate Change stream. Now, I would like to encourage all participants to please submit your questions to the question box that you see on the screen and we'll attend to them during the last 5 minutes. Now, our next speaker is Xuela Sledge from Greater Sydney Landcare. Now, over to you, Xuela, and please start your session.
Thanks, Jan. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Xuela Sledge. I am a local Landcare Coordinator with Greater Sydney Landcare Network, and I am presenting today on building resilience across Western Sydney's Cumberland Plain with partners, people and culture. And on that note, I would like to acknowledge the Darug people, the true custodians of the Cumberland Plain, and pay my respect to these people, past, present, and emerging. Okay, so the project in which is the basis for this presentation today is called the Cumberland Plain Restoration Project. And just to give you a bit of background, the Cumberland Plain is, as I mentioned, it's Darug land. It's essentially Western Sydney, and basically every single piece of native endemic vegetation within Western Sydney is pretty well considered as endangered. The Cumberland Plain Restoration Program runs for 7 years. It is funded from a Saving Our Species contestable grant. We have as our major partner the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, and the grant is administered by the New South Wales Environmental Trust to the value of approximately $350,000. So thanks guys. We started off applying with 7 initial partners. We lost one and then gained a couple. So now we have 8 partners in the project, but it's growing all the time, really. And the project encompasses 8 project sites, 5 of which are on National Parks Estate. There are 2 on council land, specifically with Hawkesbury City Council and Liverpool City Council. And there's 1 parcel on private land, which is owned and managed by Conservation Volunteers Australia in Londonderry. So the aims of the Cumberland Plain Restoration Program are to carry out ecological and cultural burning across Western Sydney, across the 8 sites, to carry out habitat enhancement, and also to, of course, carry out community engagement and education actions. So talking about partners, partners are huge in any project, and to me, they deliver a sharing of skills and knowledge, which is not too different than your ordinary working team. By having a number of partners, you really do bolster your chances of getting a resilient project team, and therefore better chance of project success. Just to go into the benefits that I believe our project partners are receiving, I hope they're receiving, and on a greater level, like Landcare, partnering with Landcare across the board gives you a good opportunity to partner with an organisation which has good levels of governance, grant administration experience, a high-level community approach, community engagement approach, a large network of people, good off-park. In the case of partnering with national parks, we have a good off-park on-ground knowledge. We have the ability to auspice grant proponents, and also being non-government, we can also carry funds across financial years, which is really handy, because state government organisations are mostly actually locked into not being able to carry their funds across. So that's a really big benefit. So on the flip side, Landcare partnering with the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, specifically I think it's the Greater Sydney branch, and definitely the Cumberland area, we have gained superior knowledge and skills in the planning and implementation of fire operations. We have had access to on-ground workforce that can support on-ground project actions. We work with staff that are task and systems driven. And we also have access to technical staff, so people that are doing research in the area. Additionally, working with national parks, we can carry out project activities on large parcels of land, which improve our chances of having good project success in terms of the benefits that delivers to biodiversity. And for me, with such a well-known brand as the Lyrebird, we have a good opportunity to get people's attention in the project. This slide is a quick snapshot of the threatened ecological communities that we're working on across the Cumberland Plain and Western Sydney. The first one on the left there is, gone backwards there. Sorry, I've gone backwards. Never mind. There we go, back to where I wanted to be. So yeah, the top image in the top left-hand corner of the screen, that's the Cumberland Plain woodland. Traditionally, it was an open environment, which was made up of sparsely spread canopy species, so trees, a really healthy grassy ground layer, and not too many shrubs. Today, much of Cumberland Plain woodland is dominated by mid-story, which is really what we're trying to tackle throughout this project in terms of restoring the landscape to what it should be and opening it up. The middle photo within this screen is the Castlereagh Scribbly Gum woodland. This is one of our project sites. It's the Londonderry Woodlands Reserve, managed by Conservation Volunteers Australia. It's a beautiful site. It's almost weed-free, and it contains a great deal of threatened plant species. And we'll be carrying out a cultural burn on that site, specifically for community outcomes, but also to hopefully address, there are senescing hakeas on site, which are really, an obvious missing gap that should be in the landscape and aren't there anymore because they require fire. So by putting that fire back in, hopefully we're going to encourage them to return, which will give us ecological and cultural benefits. The image on the right-hand side of the screen is the Cooks River Castlereagh Ironbark Forest. As the name suggests, this is an ecosystem which doesn't mind getting its feet wet. It can be found closer to riparian areas. You can see the ironbarks in that image on the right-hand side. And you can also see again, there is a thick mid-story layer. It's mostly made up of melaleucas or paper barks, and we'll be putting an ecological burn through that site in order to open up that mid-story a bit, because again, there is an imbalance there. It's not what the community traditionally looked like. Moving along. We have carried out 2 ecological burns so far in the project. One of them went well. The second one didn't burn as well, specifically because of a fire inhibiting species. So you can see in the top left-hand photo, the mid-story, which is dominating what should be an open woodland environment. That's Spicera spinosa, otherwise known as blackthorn. And when we lit fire to this burn plot, the fire didn't travel much more than 10 metres. So it didn't infiltrate into the centre of the burn plot, specifically because of the Spicera. And the Spicera indicates an imbalance, which is because of a lack of burning. Ironically, the species comes back because of a lack of burning, and then again prevents more burning because it's a fire inhibitor. So it's kind of ongoing issues associated with that species, which hopefully we will be able to tackle with our management actions. Now, moving right along, introducing the cultural side of burning. By combining the cultural and ecological outcomes that you require in terms of fire management on sites, you can tackle, bring back significant cultural bush tucker that might be a desired cultural outcome for a site, and then also tackle those management issues that have happened since European invasion, like the introduction of African lovegrass, which unfortunately has spread across Western Sydney and is a real threat to our ground cover biodiversity. Um, yeah, so you can see in the top of the screen the native cherry. It's a beautiful bush tucker plant. The fruit is on the left there. It's delicious. My kids and I love it. We eat it when we find it in the bush. It's also really attractive to birds. Birds bring in other species. And in flowering and fruiting time, it's a haven for biodiversity. So, bringing back that bush alone is inspiring ecological and cultural outcomes. An insight I have had into working with the traditional owners and looking into cultural burning in Western Sydney is to consider a cultural burn not in isolation. So to um, try and get commitment from the people involved to burn annually for a number of years. It then becomes a caring for country program, not just an isolated burn. Unfortunately, we have lost a lot of cultural expertise to carry out the cultural burning methods in Western Sydney, so we will be bringing it in. And we have partnered with Fire Sticks Alliance and look forward to learning from them and for them to renew the cultural activity here in Western Sydney again. And I would like to suggest that with their expertise, we're aiming for cool, low intensity burns, which in the right conditions really help with a management tool that can help restore our biodiversity. In addition to managing, the more recent issues that the ecosystem experiences. And as a management tool, it really, if done correctly, should be an action that is carried out without fear and worry. Um, this slide is pretty typical of that. And whilst I must recognise Yellow Mundi bush care community, this was a photo taken back in 2014 of a cultural burn, one of the first in the Sydney area. And as you can see, you can't really see the flames in that photo in the foreground, but they are there. They're just moving at a speed which really isn't hazardous for anyone in the community. There are people of all ages watching and taking a part and learning about this burn. And yeah, none of us are really too concerned because it is a cool burn carried out by people that know how to do it properly. And therefore, even the insects are safe in a burn of this type. I would also like to say that it's really important to involve the traditional owners of your country from the outset of planning a cultural burn, because then the burn becomes culturally informed. And again, in bolstering your project, your potential for project success, you build a partnership which really does meet all the requirements that it needs to meet with that traditional knowledge that has been built over thousands of years. So include the cultural people, the traditional owners in the planning and implementation of any cultural burns. Moving on to habitat management. These are actions that have been happening on Park Reserve as part of this project. We have been carrying out thinning or trittering of what you can see in the left, the before shot. It's a very closed environment, and even though those saplings coming up there, they are native eucalypts, but they're not allowing any other eucalypts in the landscape to develop to an extent where they will become old and get the hollows we require for our species to use as habitat. So with Trittering, we have opened up a number of areas on the Cumberland Plain. Again, they're the young species of trees that have come back after clearing around the 40s, the 1940s. They do then get a chance to develop their hollows. And on the Trittering note, we will be cutting and painting with any weed response following the Trittering instead of spraying, because of course we want to limit off-target kill. We are installing, we have installed greater than 30 artificial hollows on parks across Western Sydney. Specifically, one of those sites is Castlereagh Nature Reserve, where there was just, it had been so cleared so recently, and I'm talking 50 or 60 years, that the canopy layer did just not have the age to be able to provide hollows naturally for species, which we really want to introduce back into that area. And those species include the little lorikeet and the eastern free-tailed bat. We know the little lorikeet exists on private land bordering this site, and so we want to extend their range and bring them across into the National Parks estate, where we hope they have a safe and long life. It will be really remarkable to see those results within the time frame of this project, but hopefully it'll happen in the long term. So something which is a really novel approach to bolstering the structural habitat diversity in Western Sydney is the distribution of coarse woody debris, or essentially the layering of logs, limbs, trunks of trees that have unfortunately been cleared for development, but with some forethought have been stockpiled into this site, Waianamadda Regional Park. Thanks to the Cumberland area of national parks, we were able to afford the heavy equipment to manoeuvre, I think it was something like 60,000 tonnes of trees across the landscape, which had been totally depleted of that structural habitat on the ground because of years of firewood collection and other key threatening processes like that. And of course, by in the bottom left-hand corner, you can just see the layers, the chunks of structural habitat which have been layered because of the clever use of this material, which by the way should be mandated. If there is clearing of any endangered ecological communities for development, then it should be a mandated move to stockpile any timber material for future use towards habitat structural alignments. And so of course, by hoping to introduce more marsupials, reptiles, frogs into the landscape because of this added structural layer, we're also hoping to introduce our beautiful Cumberland Plain land snail, another target species for the Cumberland Plain Restoration Project. This species is endangered, and by increasing microclimates with the layered logs on the ground, we're also putting in essential nutrients, moisture, and increasing fungi layers in the soil, which is going to bring back more of our snails, and hopefully they'll start to thrive more.
Fantastic, Xuela. In last 2 minutes, would you like to, share some final takeaways for the people?
Yeah, sure. So final takeaways, there's a lot to fit in to this presentation. Look, the people, the community engagement, the educational component of the program, we've dealt with grant administration, we've dealt with fires, and we've dealt with COVID. So last year we did some people-rich events, including a forum on the biodiversity of Western Sydney, which attracted 65 people for an environmental event in Western Sydney. That was really fantastic. And having a heap of people in one room instead of battling with the postponement of a number of small events, which may have happened, unfortunately because of COVID, we were able to meet more grant outcomes. Likewise, webinars, which other organisations I know did throughout the lockdown. We did one tackling a lot of the political issues that the Cumberland Plain and Western Sydney see. And we did one on Threatened Species Day to kind of decipher what planning documents legislation means in plain English in terms of trying to raise some awareness of the threats that the Cumberland Plain, woodland and its relevant biodiversity are going to be seeing if we maintain clearing at the rate we are, even though it is a critically endangered ecological community. More people event there. We've involved schools, landholders on private property, and also people in our spotlighting events on our project sites, where the legacy of a grandmother blue box on Lieutenant Cantello Reserve showed off, just how magnificent old growth trees are in terms of habitats. Just after dusk, on 2 occasions, the community were able to see several sugar gliders running up and down this beautiful tree just because of the habitat it offered. So look, I can't talk down the benefit of old growth trees enough in Western Sydney. And you know what? It really is a living environment. The biodiversity is fantastic. We're proving that with our fauna and our flora experts. The volunteers are so dedicated, and to any decision makers out there, I would like to just suggest that Western Sydney deserves a whole lot of resources to protect and enhance its biodiversity. Um, and it should be given the respect, you know, that it deserves. Likewise, the living culture that exists in Western Sydney in the Cumberland Plain, that is also so connected to the biodiversity of the area, also deserves that respect. And I would just like to say that until the last tree is removed, and all the raptors that do glide across the motorways that sprawl across Western Sydney, until we don't see them anymore, we're all going to be fighting to preserve this beautiful environment. And I look forward to doing it in partnership with everybody, including the traditional custodians, the Darug people. So thanks very much. Are you on mute, Jan?
Oh, so sorry for that. Yes. Well, the question is, what is the best way to get involved with the Cumberland Plain Woodland Resilience effort in Western Sydney?
Well, so specifically to get involved in our project, probably a quick email to myself. You can contact me via the Greater Sydney Landcare Network website, which you'll find if you Google it. You know, we've got a lot of volunteering and always partnership opportunities coming up for the next few years. But restoring the Cumberland Plain isn't just happening by this project. It happens, you know, across Western Sydney, and an easy way to get involved in restoring the beautiful environment that it is to contact your local council and see what bush care opportunities there are for you to get involved that way. There's a lot of people doing really good stuff, and yeah, we'd love to have more people involved. Obviously, getting volunteers on the ground in Western Sydney is often a hard thing to do, so extra help is always welcomed. So yeah, please Google Greater Sydney Landcare Network, or look to contacting your local government.
Fantastic. The next question is from Ailey. Bursaria reduces fire risk then?
Berseria, look, I guess that's a political one too. And there's been a stack of research done on burning across Cumberland Plain, and we will be looking into it further. But that's what our burning has suggested so far, that Berseria actually inhibits the fire. And I guess it's doing that to protect itself because it wants to come back. If it's not being burnt, if the landscape isn't being burnt, the Berseria wants to flourish and take over, you know. And if it inhibits burning, then yeah, I guess you could consider it an inhibitor, which is something that you know, probably provides or puts a lot of fear in people who are neighbouring, you know, the scrubby bushland environment in Western Sydney when they see Berseria. But and of course, wildfire conditions will not stop any fire from going through any landscape. But you know, maybe it's not something to be so fearful of with regards to fire risk, but it's just in terms of biodiversity, it's something we need to remove to restore the balance of the community.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, Diego is asking, Western Sydney Parkland, now under new management, is a key area for the preservation of Cumberland Plain ecologies. What has been the progress in involving them in habitat restoration?
Well, I haven't actually involved Western Sydney Parkland in the work I've done across this project, or indeed the Landcare work I've done. Other partners have. And look, it's a political space. I don't want to say anything that will compromise my situation or the work of the Western Sydney Parklands. But we are dealing with partners in an environment that are being persuaded politically, that are changing I guess, main objectives from biodiversity conservation to potentially tourism operations. And in some instances, it's not really aligning, directly between the different efforts that have been carried out in Western Sydney. So yeah, look, I would love to be more involved in Western Sydney parklands. But yeah, traditionally, personally, I haven't had a great deal of involvement with them. So,
Okay, fantastic. Now, last question is from Eva. Uh, hoping to introduce a cultural burn on our place in a few years with advice from traditional owners. So that's a comment, but let's do one question. When you say you are hoping to introduce species, do you mean formally approved translocations?
no, we're not doing any translocations. It probably was just my language use there. We're only hoping to encourage the endemic species back into the areas by recreating, more of a traditional looking environment, by opening up those dominating mid-story layers, by welcoming back the original diversity to the grass layers, and also by, increasing the structural diversity of habitats with that distribution of the coarse woody debris or the artificial hollows. So we're not looking at introducing any new species at all. That's certainly a component of saving other saving our species projects, but not in this one. Just encouraging the endemic species back, through helping them with greater habitat, more appropriate habitat for them.
Fantastic. So thanks very much, Xuela. It was really informative and so engaging and so awesome to see this ecological restoration in that area of Western Sydney. And thank you and thanks everyone, all the participants for asking questions. And have a great afternoon. And the rest of the conference, which will resume, this stream will resume tomorrow, but there is so much more going on as well. So anyway, have a great day and it was awesome presentation.
Thank you, Jan.
Cool.
See you.
No
Bye.
worries.